So hi, Karl-Filip, it's great that you're here. By way of a brief introduction, you were head of strategy for the city of Ghent for many years, 14 if I'm not mistaken. And in that role, were hugely innovative in everything that you did. I think my favorite example is the fact that you had a small team working on the smart civil servant of the future, which is the perfect example of the creative bureaucracy in action. And since then, you've been a huge supporter of the Creative Bureaucracy Initiative as it's grown, even running the first Brussels Festival last September together with the government of Flanders. And I think my favourite fact about you is that since leaving the city of Ghent, you've referred to yourself as a recovering bureaucrat, doing more urban activism work for your organisation, Cities of People. And yet now, if I'm not mistaken, you're back working with the Belgian Ministry of Justice part-time. So clearly there's something about the bureaucracy that keeps hold of you. And now onto the topic for today. You have spent a lot of time thinking about how the idea of bureaucracy has progressed since Max Weber wrote his famous works at the turn of the 20th century. And it would be great if you could guide us through that timeline. So over to you.
Actually, I have to start with a disclaimer. I'm not an academic, as Robin has said. I am a partly recovered bureaucrat, working again at the federal government in Brussels, in Belgium. But I have more or less 23 years of experience as a bureaucrat during my career. I have been working mostly with, and sometimes against, governments, local, provincial, regional, federal, national, European, supranational governments, in just about any policy domain that you can imagine. Today, I work part-time as an activist for Cities of People. And Cities of People is actually something that I wanted to do because I wanted to build up upon my experience as a recovered bureaucrat and assists organizations, mostly government organizations, but also private sector organizations and civil society organizations in developing a new mode of governance. A governance that is people-centric, that is focused on the long term and is focused on the future, is focused on collaboration, and is actually in the sphere of open government. And the local level, in my experience, is the level where it all starts, because it's the level that is closest to the citizens, and it's there that things happen. But they can't do it alone. They have to work together with other levels of government. And also from my 23 years of experience, I know that the civil servant, the employee of government, can play a very big role in the way that our society is governed today. But it can play a big role. It's not necessarily a fact that civil servants play a big role at this moment. So one thing that I did from my activities in Cities of People is to organize the first Brussels Creative Bureaucracy Festival last year, together with Charles Landry, actually. He was present, and he was one of the main acts, of course, of the whole festival. And it had a lot of impact, especially on the regional level. The Flemish government supported the initiative, but there were also a lot of participants from the local level, the national level, and even the European Commission. So I would like to start with this picture. This is Madeleine Albright, for people that don't recognize this lady. Madeleine Albright was Secretary of State under President Bill Clinton in the United States. And this quote has always struck me because I totally agree with what she's saying here. We're taking 21st century challenges, we evaluate them with 20th century ideas, and we respond with 19th century tools. And it becomes very obvious that she's still right in times like today, when we're confronted with a crisis that nobody can deny, both a health crisis and an economic crisis all over the world. Our institutions, our tools are just not adapted enough to tackle those 21st century challenges. And that has a lot to do also with the way that society has evolved over the centuries. Well, we all know we started out as a tribal society. When we look back at the first city, Çatalhöyük in nowadays Turkey, that was a tribe. And a tribe that thrived because people started to learn to live together in one place and started to work together in order to thrive even more. And we evolved further into the ancient civilizations with a more complex structure, although it was still very hierarchical. Then we moved on to the industrial society, and today it's much more complicated. Our society is really a complex web of actors, of connections and interconnections between those actors, organizations, and people themselves. So those wicked problems, we can all name a few, I guess. Wicked problems are problems that not one actor can solve, actually. We need collaboration, we need creative thinking, we need leadership in order to tackle in an efficient way the wicked problems that our society is confronted with today. And of course, we all know those solutions. We know that we need creativity. We know that we need leadership and so on. But why then, if we have been saying that since, for instance, the summit of Rio in 1992, where the concept of sustainable development has been defined, why aren't we working in that way? Why aren't we actually moving towards more leadership, more creative thinking, more collaboration to solve those wicked problems? Well, to me, one of the keys is in government. And like I said, to me, it starts at the local level. And this is Jane Jacobs. Jane Jacobs was an activist mainly in New York. She moved later in her life to Toronto. She wrote a lot of interesting books. But also this quote is telling me a lot. Cities have the capability of providing something for everybody, but only because and only when they are created by everybody. And everybody is to be taken literally. Just everybody has to have the chance to to co-create the local community, the society, even the economy that he or she is part of. So Jane Jacobs has said a lot of interesting things, starting from the local level on the future of our society. Everybody also means the civil servants, also means the bureaucrats. The figures that I'm showing here are the Belgian figures. Belgium is a relatively small country. We only have 11.5 million inhabitants, of which 814,000 are working in public service. So 814,000 people are actually working for governments. And that's an opportunity for governments. That means that 814,000 people, in theory, are working for the public interest and can be motivated, can be stimulated to work towards solving those wicked problems of our society of today and tomorrow. Another quote, I love quotes, but I only love quotes that are really interesting, of course. This is a quote of Albert Einstein. He said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge." And that's also something to take into account when we look at our institutions, at the way we are working within government today. If imagination, if the power of ideas that are so crucial in solving wicked problems, that are so crucial in solving the challenges of today and tomorrow, is so important and is more important than knowledge, why are we still looking at knowledge as a solution of everything? So what Albert Einstein is saying here is very inspirational to me. Unfortunately, when we are looking at the 814,000 people working in public service there, without any doubt, most of them are doing a great job, but there are a lot of them that are still stuck in a bullshit job. What's a bullshit job? That's a job that is paid well, that is in the management hierarchy of an organization most of the time, but that people don't find very useful. The people doing those jobs don't find very useful themselves. So the biggest motivation of people in their jobs, according to David Graeber, is not the money, but is the fact that they are doing something useful and that they are doing something that matters to them and that matters to society when you transplant that to a government environment. So as I already said that I'm not an academic, but throughout my career, I've been always very interested in academic models, and especially in public administration. There are a couple of models that are really inspiring and that are really important to be aware of that they exist in order to know what creative bureaucracy actually means. So this is a timeline, and it's not a timeline. This is not a strict timeline. It starts with the essay of Max Weber that was published in 1922. He died in 1920, by the way, so it was published post-mortem. And it ends with, it's an open end actually, with open governance. And I can't define open governance today. There are many definitions of open governance, and it's not really clear what the different components are. It's not a strict timeline because elements of these four models can be seen in any government organization all over the world. So I know for sure that it's impossible to find a government organization that is 100% republic management or 100% the Weberian bureaucracy. Talking about Max Weber, as I said, he coined the term bureaucracy, and he also described the characteristics of what a bureaucracy should be like or is like. To him, a bureaucracy is the most ideal form of organization, the organization of any public or private actor. It's the most ideal form, but he didn't like it himself. So he issued a warning. He issued a warning that it could lead to a certain form of society that people would not like. When it comes to the characteristics, bureaucracy has a very strong hierarchy. Hierarchy is everything. Everything starts with decisions from the top, and the top decides what the other levels have to execute, and there's no discussion on decisions that are being made by the top. Secondly, division of labor. Everybody in public administration, every civil servant has its own, his or her own tasks, and those tasks are absolute. They can become experts in those tasks, but they are not allowed to do anything else than those tasks. That means that they become very rational experts in the things that they do. A formal selection process is also very important. Without the possibility of having subjective selection criteria, everything is being described, all the procedures are described and are very impersonal. And the one that gets the most points gets the job. Career orientation, it's impossible, except when you get a promotion to make use of internal mobility in a horizontal way. Everything within the organization is set in formal rules and regulations. And as I said, impersonality is something that is a characteristic of every aspect of the bureaucratic organization. When it comes to politics, well, the political leaders are sovereign decision makers who exercise authority, and they produce the laws and the rules. So in government, they are the ones that set the rules, and they do that by voting the laws. They are sovereign, so they can decide whatever they want in parliament, or in the case of lower governments in their executive bodies and legislative bodies. The role of managers, it's very hierarchical. So there's actually no real leadership as we know it today. The administrators do the administration of the rules and the resources, and they focus on legality, nothing else. So they focus on legality, and they make sure that the rules are executed within the administration. So they're called administrators instead of leaders. Looking at citizens, well, I have been told that the British are actually world champions in queuing. This is not a queue in Britain, unfortunately, but it's a queue for the Eiffel Tower. But of citizens, it's expected that they are subjected to public authority, that they follow the rules. They have rights within those rules, but mainly they are expected to follow rules. So they are being considered clients and constituents. And now, most importantly, of course, for the creative bureaucracy, what is an employee in an organization like that? It's not a monkey, but still employees are in iron cages. They are rule followers. They just have to execute what their hierarchy is telling them to do, and nothing else. So that is the warning that Weber actually issued, that bureaucracy is an iron cage, not only for the employees in public service, but also for citizens and for everybody that has to work with or in a public administration. New public management. New public management was actually a reaction to certain things that went wrong in bureaucracy. Not every goal that was set in the classic bureaucracy was actually met. There were a lot of inefficiencies, and there are a lot of inefficiencies. It's not a timeline, so we still know public organizations, public authorities that are in a bureaucratic setting and a bureaucratic model. There are a lot of inefficiencies, and the problem was also the impersonality of working with the public, of working with companies, and so on. So in 1991, the term was coined by Christopher Hood. The theory of new public management emerged, and it was actually done in the Anglo-Saxon world with two very important high-level political promoters, Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. And they actually said, okay, we need to turn around the way that government works. It needs to be smaller, it needs to be more efficient, it needs to be more effective, and we need to introduce the principles of economy. And the only way, or the best way that we can do that, is to adapt the way that the private sector is working into public administration. So the characteristics of new public management are hands-on management, which means that a manager in public service is getting a lot more responsibility and a lot more freedom. And that goes both ways. The freedom comes with responsibility, and the responsibility comes with reporting. The responsibility comes with performance standards. And if something can be done better by the private sector, it comes with privatizing. It comes with distancing the public service from the actual public administration, so that managers are actually only following up the contracts that are being closed with the private sector. Performance standards, KPIs, we all know them, output controls, decentralization, as I said. The hierarchy is not absolute anymore. A manager has a responsibility and has to make sure that that responsibility is met. So the hierarchy is much more complex than it was in the classic bureaucratic organization. Competition is also important. Competition not only between the public sector and the private sector, but also within the public sector. Managers and departments are being compared in terms of their performance. So it becomes a struggle to achieve more, to get better results. And cost reduction, of course, is one of the main principles, the economy cost reduction of new public management. Again, when we look at the politics, politicians, instead of looking like a group of decision makers that create the rules and make sure that they are being executed, they are more a board of directors. They're steering the administration by defining their goals. So a manager has to be made accountable towards the politician, the board of directors. They define goals, they define targets, and of course, they also define the budget frames. So they're much like a private board of directors. The leadership, well, I've been talking a lot about the managers. Instead of administrators, they become managers. They are responsible for the strategic management of their departments, while they focus mainly on inputs and outputs. Not much else than that. Citizens are customers. They are not solely clients and constituents anymore. They are customers, and they can choose. They have the right to choose between the public service delivery by their government, or are they allowed to choose? Well, they are considered to be customers, and they are allowed to make rational choices between the different service providers. And employees, the color of the cage is changing. They are in a gilded cage. Employees are service providers. They have to make sure that they satisfy the needs of their customers, and they are mostly driven by money. They are mostly driven by the opportunities they get to promote within the organization. So they are being paid well, but they also, the higher they get in the organization, the more responsibility they get, the more they have to report, the more they have to meet certain targets. So they're in a gilded cage. Society has become much more complex. So that's one of the reasons that new public governance emerged as a reaction to new public management. New public governance is based in the network society theory. Network society theory was coined by Manuel Castells, that's a Catalan sociologist, and he said that society is becoming much more flat in one sense, but also much more interconnected in the other sense. Also because of the emergence of new technologies. The society is becoming a network of different actors and stakeholders that actually interact and work together in order to achieve certain societal goals. They took distance from new public management in many ways, because they did not, or the people that invented the new public governance model, they did not actually very much like the management approach, the private sector approach of new public management. Public interests should be at the forefront of the objectives of government, and not private sector thinking, economy thinking, and so on. So public interest and governance of that public interest is much more important than management. So the process and the outcome become more important than the inputs and the outputs as it was under new public management. Collaboration and dialogue become much more important, instead of the individual thinking and the intrinsic motivation of employees of public service. Collaboration and dialogue in every sense within the organization, beyond the own public organization, and so on. Responsibilities should be shared, and we all have to look at each other as equal partners within the government and between government and private sector, civil society, citizens and other governments. And the civil servant is not an employee anymore. That's who's motivated by intrinsic motivators, but becomes a facilitator in co-creation of public service and solutions to serve the public interests. Again, looking at politics, politicians in this model are more leaders. They are political leaders of the political community, and they go out into the community and they define the problems and the goals, and they develop new solutions on their political level in collaboration with other stakeholders. Within public service, the managers become leaders also, leaders of the collaboration, the intra and inter-organizational collaboration. And they focus again on processes and results instead of inputs and outputs. Citizens are becoming partners, active citizens that are engaged in co-production, co-creation. They participate in politics. They participate also in administration. They co-govern public services. So this is a radical evolution from the thinking of the individual who has rights or who is a customer from the previous two models. And what about the civil servant? Well, the civil servant becomes actually a servant, not someone that looks at the rules and obeys them and executes them, not someone that just executes tasks and is being made accountable for them. He and she are becoming civil servants that are facilitators. They discover and mobilize citizens' needs and their resources, and they are driven by intrinsic motivation. They are driven by their willingness, they are motivated by the public interest itself and the results that they achieve in collaboration with other stakeholders in society. And you might say this is a very good model. We've been talking about a lot of those things in many, many conferences all over the world. New public governance is the solution. Well, it's not actually, because there are still a lot of things that need to be worked on. One thing is the openness of government itself. As long as politicians, managers, civil servants are still working in a setting that is 20th century, that is not taking into account, for instance, the new technological tools that citizens themselves are using to work together, to get informed, and so on, we are still not in a form or a model that is adapted to our society of today. So that is why since 2007, open governance is on the rise. And as I said earlier, there are a lot of definitions on open governance. But what they have in common, those definitions, is that they're all about civic participation. They're all about creating more transparency in government and accountability, responsiveness, effectiveness. They're also about more information, more participation, more collaboration, use of new technologies, open data, open source, and so on. And they're also about open politics. So at all levels of our public administration and political administrations, they expect to get a change towards more openness. This is a model that was actually launched in 2008 when Barack Obama became president of the United States. To me, this is a very interesting model because it shows a lot of things that our front-running administrations, our front-running governments today are already working on. And it tackles a lot of the problems that the previous models have shown. Transparency, open government data, monitoring policies, the effectiveness, the efficiency of policies, but also being able to follow up those policies. Breaking down silos and pyramidal structures. In the previous three models, there was still a big risk on having those silos. Open government, the open government model wants to tackle those. Working horizontally to tackle those silos, organize partnerships with NGOs, with companies, with other public authorities, with citizens themselves, and then participation by co-designing, deliberation, consultation, and to me, most importantly, also to educate, to create awareness of citizens on policies and the complexity of running a government. So this is something that I really like. It's not a set model yet, but what is clear to me is that you need a holistic vision to create a public administration that is adapted to the society of today and that can adapt to further evolutions in the future. Only working on certain aspects of open governance or moving towards certain characteristics of new public governance isn't enough. It's all or nothing. So working with it within public administration or working with public administration means that you want it to evolve in an open direction, means that you have to tackle all these aspects at the same time. And to me, that means also that you can achieve more creativity within public administration. That those 814,000 Belgian people working in public administration today can be top civil servants, that they are motivated to work on solutions to challenges that they are confronted with today, and that they can work on solutions that are actually sustainable and have a strong basis within our society and with citizens themselves. But it needs an organization, a public administration that has been adapted, that created space, mental space, for allowing those civil servants to be creative. And a couple of other things matter. The role and the focus of government matter. When you look at the role of the government in the previous three models, in the classic bureaucracy, new public management, and new public governance, it's radically different. The role of government in the classic bureaucracy is to rowing. It designs and implements policies, and it focuses on one single politically defined objective. So the government organization just rows with the things that they are getting from their political decision makers. In new public management, they steer, but mainly they steer because they are also a catalyst to unleash market forces. They are steering an economy that delivers services to customers. In new public governance, they serve. They negotiate and broker interests among citizens and community groups, and they create shared values. So this is radically different. It's the role of government in open governance should be very different from those three previous models as well. And to me, that means that government has to consolidate the vision, a long-term vision on the future. The government is the only partner, and government administration is the only partner in society that is able to consolidate that vision, to take decisions that are strongly based and shared by society. They are the only ones that can bring together the dots, that can connect the dots, that can facilitate the ecosystem working on societal challenges and societal goals of today. So role and focus of government matters. Organizational culture, it goes without saying, it also matters. If you have a strong open government on the political level, but you have a very strong bureaucratic government organization, it will not work. Civil servants will not be civil servants. They will either find themselves in iron or in gilded cages. So the organizational culture should reflect also the willingness to give space to civil servants to facilitate the emergence of new ideas or to come up with new ideas themselves. Leadership styles matters. Of course, the name of the leaders in the three governance models change. They go from administrators over managers to leaders. And that is fundamentally different. A leader is not an administrator. A leader can administrate, but an administrator will generally not lead. So the leadership style on every level within public administration matters, whether a bureaucrat can be creative or not. Semantics matter also, the use of words. So be aware if there is a human resources department in your public administration, because that means that certain people consider you to be a resource, and resources are not what we as humans like to be. And maybe it's because of the fact that I'm not an English native speaker, but I don't like the word management either, because to me, management gives me a feeling of standing still, of keeping things as they are. So rather use other words to describe the people that you want to lead. Leaders might be a better word, or something else, I don't know. A customer, a citizen is not a customer. A citizen generally has no choice when he's looking at government and gets certain public services. And to be considered a customer also gives a very nasty feeling to citizens. They want to be heard. They want to be they want to be treated as humans and not as customers. And finally, processes and procedures, two words that I don't like either, because once you set everything that happens within your organization in processes and procedures, they seem to be fixed in stone. So flexibility is gone, and you might get a problem with the evolution of your organization once you set everything in those processes and procedures. That's also all from me. I hope this was more or less instructive. I wanted to create awareness about the fact that these governance models exist, and I hope that you will look at your organizations thinking about certain characteristics and decide upon the betterment of administration of your public administration. Thank you very much.
So Karl-Filip, thank you so much for that. I wanted to come back to what you said at the beginning regarding the disclaimer about being an academic, just because I think it's precisely that point that you're not an academic, yet you're drawing on these models, taking the learnings that everybody should be from them, and then applying them to the real life practice of being a civil servant. And I really like that. So I just wanted to bring back to that. And similarly, your final point around semantics, I loved, because this idea of the creative bureaucracy draws a lot of attention for being, to many, an oxymoron. And precisely this idea of questioning what terms do we really need to describe the governance models that we want to represent, I think is a nice note to end on. So yeah, I learned a lot, and I hope everybody watching did too.
Thank you.